The moment Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez walked onto the debate stage, the air shifted. It wasn't her usual crowd. This wasn't a college auditorium or a progressive town hall in Queens. This was Washington's most watched international forum, broadcast live across 2 continents. And waiting at the other podium, already calm and composed, was Ibrahim Traoré. The moderator barely had time to finish the introductions when AOC leaned into her mic with that signature smirk. "We speak for justice. For those who've been silenced. Oppressed. Forgotten," she said, looking squarely at Traoré. Her tone was sharp, not welcoming, not diplomatic. She wasn't here to build bridges. She was here to draw lines. Traoré didn't flinch. He didn't smile. He waited. AOC continued, louder now. "You talk about sovereignty, but your people need aid. You talk about dignity, but your courts are broken. Justice isn't just about standing alone, it's about lifting others up. Do you even know what real justice looks like?" That was her mistake. Traoré finally moved. Just a slight shift, his fingers tapping once on the wooden podium, the sound echoing across the silent hall. Then, without even looking at her, he spoke. "When you say justice, you mean cameras, applause, scripted tears," he said quietly, yet every word pierced. "You perform justice. We live it." A hush fell. Even the moderator froze. He turned to her then, slowly, deliberately. "In my country, justice isn't a hashtag. It's the farmer whose land we returned. The daughter who walks to school unafraid. The soldier who disobeys an order to kill. That's justice. You wouldn't recognize it, because it doesn't come with a podium or a red carpet." AOC blinked. Her posture stiffened. She hadn't expected this. Not from him. The crowd, once leaning into her confidence, was now leaning toward something else, something unfamiliar, raw, real. And for the first time in a long time, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was no longer the loudest voice in the room. AOC inhaled sharply, composing herself as applause trickled through the hall, surprisingly not for her. She stepped forward, forcing a smile. "That's poetic," she quipped, "but justice without accountability is just noise. You criticize systems, but offer none. Your version of justice is power without transparency." There it was, the pivot. She was trying to frame him as a populist with no plan. A dictator in disguise. But Traoré wasn't rattled. He studied her like a surgeon studies a wound. Then he spoke again, steady, clipped. "Transparency?" he asked. "You mean the kind where corporations fund your campaigns and your people still sleep on the subway? Or the kind where your prisons overflow while your schools collapse?" The audience stirred. He didn't wait for her rebuttal. "You tell the world how to live. You measure other nations with rulers you broke yourselves. You call it democracy, but it's a costume. And the fabric is unraveling." AOC raised her hand to interrupt, but Traoré held the room now. The cameras were no longer focused on her indignation, they were locked on his conviction. "I don't fly thousands of miles to perform compassion," he said. "I don't preach from cities I don't understand. When I say justice, I mean feeding the orphan and punishing the corrupt, even when it's my own brother." "You?" She froze. In that instant, something unspoken passed between them, a realization that this wasn't about who had the microphone. It was about who carried the truth. The moderator stepped in, clearly rattled. "Congresswoman, would you like to respond?" AOC glanced at the crowd. She knew the answer wouldn't save her. Not tonight. Because Traoré had done what few ever managed in her world, he made her look rehearsed. AOC leaned in again, but this time with less certainty. "Strong words," she said, trying to soften her tone. "But let's be honest. You silence journalists. You detain dissenters. That's not justice, that's fear in uniform. She expected gasps. Instead, the room held its breath. Traoré didn't deny the accusation. He didn't deflect. He stepped into it. Yes, he said, I silence liars who call it journalism when they sell chaos. And I detain those who take money from foreign hands to light fires in their own homes. The calm in his voice made it more jarring. I don't pretend everything we do is perfect. But I don't hide behind slogans either. You want to talk about fear? Fear is when a man builds something for his people and you sanction him into hunger. Fear is when a child dreams of clean water and your companies drain the wells. The room shifted. Viewers across the globe weren't seeing a tyrant, they were seeing a man who had come through fire and learned to speak without flinching. He wasn't playing defense. He was redrawing the battlefield. You wear justice like a badge, he said, now looking straight at AOC. I wear it like a scar. That line cut deep. AOC's face flushed. Not from embarrassment, this was something deeper. She had expected a political opponent, not a moral one. Traoré continued, you say I lead through fear. I say you lead through fiction. You tell people they're free, then count how many credit cards they need to survive. The moderator shifted nervously. This wasn't just a debate. It was an unraveling. AOC's vision of America was being pulled apart, not by anger, but by clarity. And Traoré was just getting started. The moderator tried to steer the debate back to safer ground, his voice strained. Let's pivot to global cooperation. How can your nations work together moving forward? But Traoré didn't move forward. He doubled down. Work together, he echoed, eyes locked on AOC. That depends. Will you come with respect, or with instructions? AOC's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Traoré took one step toward the center of the stage, and the lighting caught the edge of his face, resolute, unflinching. Let me remind you, he said, when your troops landed on our soil, it wasn't to cooperate. When your aid came, it wore strings like chains. And when we said no more, your media called us unstable. He turned slowly toward the audience. They don't fear instability. They fear independence. Applause broke out, not thunderous, but meaningful. The kind that comes when people feel spoken for, not spoken at. AOC tried to interrupt. Respectfully. Traoré didn't raise his voice, but somehow he silenced hers. You speak of justice, he said. But when we reject your model, you call it rebellion. When we say we'll build our own path, you say we're lost. When we lead ourselves, you send advisors. Always advisors. He paused. We don't need advisors. We need for you to step back. AOC looked stunned. Not just by the words, but by the wave of approval rippling through the hall. Traoré finished with steel in his tone, you say your democracy is exportable. We're telling you, it's expired. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was historic. And somewhere in the back of the room, a student journalist scribbled the words that would headline papers across 3 continents the next day. He didn't just debate her. He dismantled the script. AOC straightened her back. She wasn't used to losing control of the narrative, especially not on live television. But Traoré had done more than speak, he had shifted the axis of the conversation. You keep talking about your path, she said sharply. But what about your people? They don't get a vote in your path, do they? A calculated jab. She was betting on liberal audiences back home. She leaned into the camera. You rule with guns, not ballots. Traoré didn't flinch. I rule with memory, he said. The memory of who we were before your banks, before your missions, before your borders. A murmur swept the audience. He turned to her directly now. You think democracy is a ballot box? We think it's the ability to eat. To live. To not die in someone else's war, or starve under someone else's deal. He walked toward the center of the stage again, not pacing, but anchoring. You parade your votes like they mean freedom. But what's the value of a vote when your country jails its own truth-tellers? What's the price of democracy if the only choices are picked by corporations? AOC opened her mouth, then paused. That last one, that one stung. Traoré delivered the next line like a closing argument. Maybe I don't rule the way you like. But I don't pretend my people are free while they drown in debt. The crowd erupted. It wasn't just applause anymore. It was reaction. Shock. Awe. Traoré stood still, letting the moment breathe. Across the world, clips of that single statement flooded social media. Young people reposted it with captions like, "This isn't a politician. This is a mirror." And somewhere in Washington, a senior advisor stared at the TV and whispered, "We didn't prepare for him." Backstage, producers were in a silent frenzy. The network director signaled to cut to commercial, but the moderator, sweating under the lights, gestured frantically, "No. This is the show now." AOC tried to regroup. She walked back to her podium, trying to salvage her authority. "We're not perfect," she said, voice firm but shaking slightly, "but we've built institutions that let people speak out. Protest. Push for change. Can your people do that without fear?" Traoré didn't answer right away. He just looked at her. Not with anger, but with a kind of cold disappointment. Then he spoke. "My people don't fear punishment when they protest," he said. "They fear silence when they speak." The words landed heavy. No one moved. "In your world," Traoré continued, "change is allowed, until it threatens power. In mine, change is demanded, because we've lived without it too long." AOC tried to interject. "You're dodging the question." "No," Traoré said calmly. "I'm answering the real one. You ask if they can speak. I ask if they're ever heard." He stepped forward once more, his voice lower now, but sharper. "You see instability where I see awakening. You see resistance where I see rebirth. And every time we reject your script, you call it chaos." He paused, just long enough. "Maybe it's not chaos. Maybe it's clarity." The audience leaned in. Phones were already out, recording. Tweet drafts were half-written. Journalists were texting editors, "You're gonna want the headline ready." Traoré turned toward the camera now, breaking the fourth wall like a man who knew he was no longer playing the role they expected. "We don't need your stage," he said. "We've outgrown your theater." That line would become a meme, a mural, and a manifesto. And AOC? For the first time in her public career, she looked like the guest, not the host. The moderator finally stepped in, his voice brittle. "Let's take a moment to refocus." But the audience wasn't listening. The debate wasn't just a segment anymore. It had become a reckoning. AOC gripped her notes tightly. "You keep dodging responsibility, Ibrahim. You blame the West for everything. When will you take ownership?" That word, ownership. Traoré looked amused now, almost bemused. "Ownership," he repeated, as if tasting it. Funny choice of words, from a country built on stolen land, using stolen hands. The studio fell dead silent. Even the tech crew paused their controls. AOC stammered, That's an oversimplification." "No," Traoré cut in. "It's your version that's simplified. Wrapped in slogans, packaged for primetime, sold as virtue." He stepped forward again, calm and cutting. "You say we should look inward. We do. We see scars where your fingerprints still linger. We see contracts signed in smoke. We see leaders bought in dollars, not votes." AOC tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. You act like your world is innocent. I never claimed innocence, Traoré said. Only that we finally know the game. And we're done playing it by your rules. He paused, then dropped the line that would dominate headlines the next morning. You taught us democracy with a whip in one hand and a trade deal in the other. Don't be shocked we remember both. Gasps filled the air. On Twitter, someone posted a screenshot with the caption, Traoré didn't debate. He dismantled. Even across oceans, the soundbite was traveling fast. AOC blinked. The stage felt different now, less like hers, more like a courtroom. And Traoré? He looked unshaken. As if he had one more truth to drop, and everyone could feel it coming. The final segment was meant to be about shared progress. But by now, the illusion of unity was gone. AOC attempted a reset. Let's be honest, Mr. Traoré. Without American innovation, funding, and diplomacy, many of your nations wouldn't even be on the map. A few in the crowd nodded. Then Traoré leaned in, not with anger, but with a steady, surgical calm. No, he said. We were always on the map. You just drew the borders. The moderator froze. AOC opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Traoré stepped forward slowly. You gave us aid, with interest. You gave us peace, after you armed the war. You gave us partnerships, after installing puppets. His voice hardened. You act like the architect. But you only showed up after the foundation cracked. He turned to the audience now, not to the panel, not to the moderator, but to the people. You don't bring progress, he said. You brand it. He pointed, gently, at AOC's notes. You want us to applaud the system that caged us, because you left the door open. The room was absolutely still. Then Traoré delivered the quietest line of the night, and somehow, the loudest. You didn't give us a voice. You just finally ran out of ways to silence it. AOC's lips parted, but her argument had vanished. On screen, the camera slowly pushed in on Traoré's face. Still. Clear. And absolutely in control. The moderator, pale, muttered, "We're out of time." But the story had already been written. And it didn't need a clock. Outside the studio, protesters had gathered, some waving American flags, others holding up signs that read, "Let Africa Speak." The broadcast had gone viral within minutes. Clips were already trending globally. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted from debate to declaration. AOC sat back in her chair, visibly frustrated. You're rewriting history with emotion, not facts. Traoré turned toward her one final time, quiet but unmistakably firm. No. I'm uncovering the parts you buried. The audience didn't cheer. They didn't boo. They listened. Your facts were always filtered, Traoré continued. Written in think tanks. Sanitized in studios. But our memory? It doesn't need subtitles. AOC crossed her arms. So what? You want to burn bridges? No, he said. I want to stop pretending we're standing on one. Even the moderator was frozen now, no cue cards left, no break scheduled. Traoré took a step forward, not grandstanding, just present. I don't hate the West. But I refuse to praise it for pulling out the knife and asking for thanks after the bleeding. His voice dropped, almost like a whisper into a storm. We're not here for apologies anymore. We're here for truth. And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe it should. Silence. Then, unexpectedly, a single clap from somewhere in the audience. Then another. And another. Traoré didn't smile. He didn't need to. AOC looked at him, her eyes no longer defiant, but searching. For control. For footing. For the story she thought she was telling. But the narrative had changed hands. And the world was watching. By morning, every major outlet had picked up the debate. Headlines split along predictable lines, some painting Traoré as a disruptor, others calling him a truth-teller. But none could deny one fact: something had shifted. In Brooklyn, a barber stopped trimming to watch Traoré's closing line again. In Nairobi, a teacher played the clip for her civics class. In São Paulo, Paris, Istanbul, people weren't arguing over what was said. They were wondering why it hadn't been said sooner. Backstage, after the cameras were off and the audience had cleared out, AOC approached him. She didn't come with a handshake. "Why now?" she asked. "Why you?" Traoré didn't turn. He just looked at the empty stage. The microphones. The silence. Because silence, he said, was never neutral. She stood there, unsure of whether to defend or deflect. But Traoré's words kept echoing, not in the room, but in her. "You think I want chaos," he continued. "But I want clarity. I want to speak without your edits. Without your frame." AOC looked away, then back. "And what if no one listens?" "They already are," he replied. Then he walked away, not triumphant, not angry. Just whole. Outside, the air was electric. Not with celebration, but with awakening. Traoré stepped into the crowd. A young woman shouted his name. A man saluted. A child just looked up, eyes wide. No security. No speeches. Just presence. In the background, the studio lights dimmed. But in 1,000 cities, the glow of screens remained. This wasn't just a viral moment. It was the start of a louder chapter. And this time, the mic didn't belong to the usual hands. What just happened wasn't politics. It wasn't a debate. It was a confrontation between performance and principle. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came armed with applause lines. Ibrahim Traoré came with lived truth. She spoke of justice, he showed how it gets staged. She invoked progress, he pointed out the price tag behind it. And for once, the world listened to the voice that wasn't meant to speak. Traoré didn't play by the rules. He rewrote them. He didn't shout to be heard, he stood still and made silence uncomfortable. And while others debated optics, he demanded authenticity. You see, in every generation, someone walks into the room and refuses to bow, not out of pride, but out of purpose. Tonight, that someone wasn't born of polls or parties. He was born of consequence. They thought he'd be another moment. But he became a movement. And now, the question isn't whether Traoré will be invited back. The question is, how long until others stop performing and start answering? Because the theater is cracking. And the truth? It just walked off stage.